He has kids. Um, there's constantly people vandalizing his property, spray painting shit on his old gate, that was handmade by his dad, who was an architect, I think. And he really, because he's a World War II Marine, he really says at one point, you know what, if you people want a war, it's a war you're going to get. Okay. He starts buying up firearms and all this other shit, and even customizing them to be more effective.
So it's like a Gran Torino type thing?
It is Gran Torino. Yeah, it's a lot like Gran Torino. But the prevailing attitude is actually not that hateful in comparison, even though Gran Torino it melts away at the end, that hatefulness, But even more so here, all that it needs is one thing to happen to this Henry guy, this old man, Henry, like 89 years old, that these people chip in and help him when he has to go to the hospital for some reason. Okay, they hold on to his keys for him, and he's not familiar with them being this nice to him, and it opens up this amazing door for him to become a part of this neighborhood in a more organic way, to the point that he starts building a treehouse for all the kids so they don't have to play in the streets. And he even buys a police siren for them to operate and have fun with, and eventually use when there's an emergency in the neighborhood. It's fascinating, and I just knew things were not going to end good for this character. And I won't say if I was right or not, but it really warmed my heart, this book, in a way that I had not expected it to be. I didn't need if I hadn't have been really out of it, I would not have even purchased this book. But I have to say, I recommend it to anyone. It is really 5 stars, and it really brought me out of a funk where I think we can't join together anymore. With that being said, here is our next guest, who I am absolutely honored to have on, Mr. Grady Hendrix, author of Paperbacks from Hell.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, can you hear us okay?
Oh yeah. I hope I sound all right. I'm using my AirPod microphone, so
sounds totally fine.
So, good. Okay.
How much research did you have to do to compile the lists and break them up into categories for Paperbacks from Hell? You've got different subgenres like supernatural, clowns, I guess, things like that.
Yeah, well, Paperbacks from Hell, it comes out of a weird place where I don't know if I call it research so much as like fishing in the dark. I was just sort of I love paperback swap shops, with the kind of places where like people bring in their 12 romance novels they finished, and they get credit and get 10 more romance novels. And I noticed that all these stores had a big Western section, a huge romance section, and then a really significantly sized horror section. And I was like, I don't know any of these authors. Like, I was like, who's Ken Yulo? Who's William Johnstone? And so I just started reading them at random and writing up on Tor.com, because they would pay, for a while they were paying $50 a post. And so if I did 5 posts for them in a month or 4 posts for them in a month, that was like my grocery money. And my editor at Quirk, Jason Rakulik, was like, we probably won't buy a book like this, but if you pitched it, I'd want to read the pitch. And they wound up buying it. And so what happened was I got suddenly thrown in the deep end without any basis beyond my scattered reading. And so the first 2 things I did is I got Will Erickson, who runs Too Much Horror Fiction blog, who's been doing this stuff for years. I got him on board. And then I just started reading. And I think I had 10 months to write this book. And in that time, I read 326 books, something around there. And Will and I talked a lot, just like, is there a story here? Like, how does this break down? Because that's the thing, right? Like, we could just throw a lot of reviews in a book, but is there a story with a beginning, a middle, and end? And we ultimately found out, if we went through chronologically, not only was there a story, right, that there was this, like, that horror didn't sort of exist as a literary genre. Then in 67 and 71, you had Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, and Thomas Tryon The Other. They were all bestsellers. Then you had these waves of books, and then it sort of died in 95 after this serial killer boom. And we realized that it kept getting rejuvenated. A big book would come out, and everyone would imitate it. So right after Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, and the other, you had all these books imitating, you know, doing these sort of satanic possession things. And then you had these Exorcist knockoffs about possessed children, and that rolled into the Omen novelizations, which were 75, 76, I think. And that launched those novelizations sold huge, and that launched a huge Killer Kid thing. Then you had the Amityville Horror launching this whole, and Burnt Offerings launching this whole boom of haunted house. So we were lucky enough that it organized itself, but it took us a while to see how it was organized, and we read a lot of books. A lot of books, man. I had to drink a lot to come down from that.
Skeletons were a big theme in the 80s, like major, and they did have a wow factor. Some of those covers are intense, man.
Oh, the covers are amazing, and like skeletons can really, I mean, they could do anything. I always thought their whole point was just to sort of support our, you know, just to protect our internal organs, really. And then we have a muscular system to support them, but they can be doctors. There's skeletons who graduate from college, skeleton lawyers, skeleton rock musicians.
Yeah,
They can play the banjo.
Yeah.
They can play the banjo. They can, they can do anything. And, you know, it's interesting. I was talking to Richard Newton, who did a lot, really, really good artist. He's a little cranky, but a super good artist, super nice guy. He was very generous with his time.
No, did you do the like the ones where like a lot, they would always have like glowing eyes, like a lot of doll covers. I think the Uprising.
Glowing eyes are an evergreen, right? Like, you know, Dracula had glowing eyes. Like, the glowing eyes are going to be with us forever. You got those glowing eyes in Suspiria. Yeah. But I was just going to say, Richard Newton, who was one of the big cover artists who did a ton of skeleton covers, he told me that it wasn't as easy in the 70s as you were an individual and not a medical school to get your own skeleton. And he actually stole one from a medical college. It was sort of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, take it out the back door for $40 thing to get his own skeleton to paint from.
It's freaking amazing. So he did the skeleton covers. I think I'm getting him confused.
A lot of them.
The guy that did a lot of the ones in the 90s that Zebra had, the Uprising by Abigail McDaniels.
Well, you know, I mean, there were so many covers, right? These artists, you know, it takes about a month to do a cover. So there were tons of people doing skeleton covers. Lisa Falkenstern did a bunch. Richard Newton. I mean, you know, if you could paint, you could paint a skeleton as long as you could steal one.
Yeah. William Thiessen was probably my single favorite skeleton cover artist, specifically Wild Violence. That was like, out of all of them, I always thought that was the best one. Now,
Thiessen's really interesting. I mean, because all of his covers have a flower on them somewhere, because he loved painting flowers.
So he was perfect for Wild Violence.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, what were you saying?
Did you meet or, you know, get into correspondence with a lot of these authors or maybe their estates? Because I know that after you did, you know, the whole Paperbacks from Hell thing, and it became really big, Ruby Jean Jensen's family like kind of came back into the scene, and now they're like putting her stuff back on Amazon. And like new editions. Did you have anything to do with that or like talk to them?
I knew a lot. I mean, I met a lot of these authors who are really terrific people. But they and so with the Valancourt guys, that press, I helped out getting we did sort of a Paperbacks from Hell line, and Valancourt was sort of ahead of the curve, bringing like Michael McDowell stuff back into print, and Joan Sampson's, who did The Auctioneer. But and we've done about 13 books together, I think. But Ruby Jean Jensen's family and her estate, they wanted to do it on their own. They were very, very determined to sort of do it their way. So, you know, I mean, her career is really fascinating. But yeah, they did it all on their own. So their re-release is Riding Solo.
Yeah. Did you ever talk to the Johnstone family any? Because I know Joe Johnstone, she's pretty active online with her whole Western fan base. So I assume it probably
Yeah, I never did actually, and I probably should have, but she's doing her own thing. She does mostly Westerns now, I think.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny. So my publisher for Paperbacks from Hell is Quirk, and their distributor is Penguin Random House. And when they went in to do their sales presentation for Paperbacks from Hell, we had all this William Johnstone material, and the Penguin Random House people went crazy because they're like, within their empire, he's one of their authors. He's still one of their top 100 sellers because his westerns still sell like bonkers all over like Montana, Wyoming, Arizona. Like they're still sold in like drugstores and stuff. So
Yeah, any
Johnstone's still a
Walmart you
going
go
concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any Walmart you go in, you can find freaking William Johnstone, even though
Yeah.
he's been dead. But they seem to hit like an audience that isn't really a heavy reading audience, but just kind of want that comfort, like more of like an older audience that grew up with westerns on TV. But
yeah, and it's and you know, Johnstone, I don't think he's a particularly great writer, but his books move. You know, stuff's happening in every chapter. Like I've certainly read books, especially by Zebra, where it's just like, God, does anything happen in this book? And that's never been something you could say about Johnstone. His books go.
yeah, they definitely do. You're never bored reading them, and
Right. You may be confused, but you're not bored.
Yeah. Toy Cemetery was probably the single most
feel like
fun
that's
I've ever
perfect.
had being confused.
Yeah, I feel like Toy Cemetery is like maximum Johnstonage. Like that book is every trend he had coming together perfectly.
Yeah, like what was up with the whole dang werewolf thing? Like that seemed to come out of nowhere.
The
and then
ghost werewolf.
Yeah. I mean,
Whoa.
And don't they
insane
kill
book.
it with a silver stake?
I can't remember because
Yeah,
at first I thought it was just
I
supposed to
have a
be
vague
like,
memory, but yeah. And I remember they have a funeral for a tiny little toy clown, and the main character cries, and his teardrops land on its dead body, and like all the other toys are really moved. Yeah, I feel like it's a perfect John Storm of William Johnstone.
yeah, I wonder if that's one of the ones that he wrote like fully, like didn't plagiarize himself at all, because that is a thing that you know pops up with his books, just a paragraph repeating. But
Yeah. Well, I feel like if you write so much, you know what I mean? You're just like, yeah, just cannibal. Like he had a pretty savvy idea of his audience.
yeah, I always kind of wonder if he was like genuine or if he knew that it was kind of like hokey. Like I get the feeling that he was serious, even though everything's crazy and hokey. But
Yeah, you know,
it's possible he was just kind of like tricking people. But
well, I think it's possible for both things to be true simultaneously. Like, I think it's possible he was a true believer. I mean, he was a very, devout Christian, from what I understand, and like really believed in a lot of the like sort of like, America was going to hell and there was black magic and heavy metal music were responsible. But I think you can also, yeah, but I think you can also do that and have a sense of humor. I think he had a sense of humor about how far he was pushing things.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I did want to bring one cover to your attention that has probably fascinated me more than any other. And I understand that the story doesn't quite live up to what the cover promises with this. Tell me what you think, because I haven't read it. And here it is. The Little People.
Oh, The Little People. Yeah.
Does it live up to it or not?
Yeah, you said that was the catalyst for you looking into this, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I was already I wasn't really reading a lot of these books, but I was like, come on, man, you can't see that cover and walk by. Are you not human? And the artist on that is Hector Garrido, who I tried to get in touch with. He's a teacher now in California. He teaches illustration, and I just could never. I sent him some emails. I never heard back, but that cover is astounding. It's more amazing when you realize that the hardback cover by oh crap, I'm forgetting his name, but he was a big designer of the day in 70s books. The hardback cover is a completely white cover, completely blank, and in the lower right hand corner there's a tiny little elf foot, and I'm like sort of leaving the cover, and I'm like, whoa, you can read a book about Nazi leprechauns and just paint a foot, man. I'm with Hector Garrido. You read a book about Nazi leprechauns, you want to see Nazi leprechauns. The book is 230 pages. John Christopher, he wrote the White Mountain Tripod series, which was a serialized comic in Boy's Life. It's a lot of fun. I would say the book is about, if you're going to take that 230, 240 pages, I would say 140 pages of it is bleh, and 100 pages of it is white gold. It is, I mean, they are literally Nazi leprechauns who've been trained to be S&M sex slaves for the Gestapo, who have escaped to a castle in Ireland where they're hiding out and fighting rats. And there is a near sex scene between a Gestapo, a Nazi leprechaun, and a full-sized human being. And there's also a great moment, which is like one of the most tasteless things I've ever read, because the whole thing takes place when someone who inherits this book, when inherits this castle, turns it to a B&B. And so you've got all these guests at the opening weekend of the bed and breakfast, and one of them is this elderly couple, and they met when he was a prison guard in Auschwitz, and she was a Jewish internee in the concentration camp, and they fell in love, and they have a 20-page flashback to their love affair. It's like when Harry met Sally meets Schindler's List. It is the most horrible thing I've ever read, which to me trumps the Nazi leprechauns. But, you know, Nazi leprechauns are pretty compelling.
I kind of get the feeling John Christopher just wrote this like straight from his id. Like there was just no filter between like his brain and the words on the page.
There's certainly no good taste filter between his brain and the words on the page. But also, you know, it was originally a British book, and there are a lot of British Nazi books. Like I think the old adage, there was a guy who wrote an article in the 60s, I think, saying there are 3 things you can put on the cover of a book that will make it a bestseller in England: golf, cats, or Nazis. And so someone actually put out a parody book, I believe in the 70s or 80s, that had a Nazi playing golf with a cat sitting on his shoulder. You know, there is a big strain of Nazi horror in the UK. It's just, they're fascinated by Nazi books.
You know what? I think I may know why. Are you familiar with the radio personality from World War II called Lord Haha?
Oh, Lord Haha, yeah, the collaborator.
After the war, he was hanged, and we're talking
I didn't realize that. Yeah,
that wasn't that long ago. He was hanged for his support, his unashamed support of the Nazi Party. So even in that's not that long ago, the 40s, they hung him like this was 18th century or the Dark Ages or something, but they still hung him as recently as the 40s. And I always found that fascinating, but that may be a link to why they're so fascinated with British Nazis.
Well, you know, maybe, I mean, there might be something else going on there, given the British were directly bombed by the Nazis, because I actually read somewhere that Nazi erotica was actually very popular in Israel in like the 60s and 70s.
Now that's just
a great documentary.
What the heck?
That's pretty gross. So in other words, a Jewish person who's a prisoner in the camp and a guy working Auschwitz, like it's a 9 to 5, they meet. And it's treated like How I Met Your Mother. Is that what I'm understanding here?
Yeah, it's treated like this. They do a whole flashback, like a 20 or 30 page flashback, might even be a little longer than that, where it's like, oh, you know, they have funny mix-ups and like, you know, and then it gets very dramatic because she's going to be sent to the showers and he sort of gets her out of line at the last minute. And then they have this sort of dreamy, I didn't know you loved me kind of moment. And like, they play it as like a straight romance, and you're like, I get what you're doing here, but I'm not sure it's working. But yeah, The Little People contains multitudes of little people.
Now, did you ever have any flack or catch any flack from some of the authors you featured? Like, did you ever get in contact with, say, Stephen Gresham, because I know he's still alive, David Scow, who I think you gave a bad review of the Kill Riff in there. Did he ever comment on that or no?
No, but you know, John Skip I've met, and he and I have talked quite a bit. No, we've talked a lot about splatterpunk, Skip Inspector fame. Yeah. Because, you know, the thing with the splatterpunks is Yeah. So two things. One is John Skip's been great. He's huge, and I actually want to do an oral history of the splatterpunk movement because I feel like it's not my thing. Like I don't really enjoy it on a literary level. I just feel like it's a little bit edgelord for me. But it was super duper important in the history of horror. And one of the things is I would love to go back and rewrite the splatterpunk stuff in Paperbacks from Hell because I don't disagree with my take on it because I'll never admit I'm wrong. But I would love to give it a little more depth and nuance because one of the problems with splatterpunk is it was such a reaction to the moral majority in the States at the time. And, that was the era I was growing up. And, I remember one church in my neighborhood or community, having a CD smashing party. And I remember the tone and tenor of press coverage of horror and heavy metal and comic books. They were going to rot your brain. And I'm writing a book right now that's a little bit like Paperbacks from Hell. It's a history of sort of like martial arts movies coming to America in the 70s and 80s. And there's a lot of pushback on that, like legislation getting passed to ban nunchucks and throwing stars. And
man, there was lame.
Yeah, and there was a lot of hyperventilating. And, there were Senate hearings about banning heavy metal music and putting a rating system on it. And, there was talk of getting rid of horror movies and stuff like that. And the splatterpunks were kind of like, their attitude was, you think that's bad? We'll show you bad. And their pushback, I think, was really important. And it was an important part of the counterculture at the time. But now when that sort of cultural moment has passed, you're like, well, wait, who are you fighting? Like you see the pushback, but you don't see what the splatterpunks were pushing against anymore because that sort of part of the moral majority seems funny now and sort of like ridiculous. And it's hard to remember, even for me, how life and death that struggle felt. These people wanted to get rid of the entertainment we loved. And if you're 22, 23, 24, which a lot of these splatterpunk guys were, and they were mostly guys, you're like, wait, no, you're not coming for what I love without me fighting back. And splatterpunk was their way to fight back. And their misogyny was very much of a piece with where publishing was at the time. I mean, so many books were misogynistic at the time, and not even like misogynistic, like let's murder some women, but sort of like, yes, little lady, pat on the head stuff. And so I feel like they were much more a piece of their times that doesn't travel well chronologically. And I wish I'd been able to give that a little more nuance in the book. I feel like I didn't quite do justice by those guys. And I do regret that. And John and I talked about that. And he's like, oh, please, you gave us way more credit than we deserve. But I think they really were a big part in pushing back on the moral majority. And I do want to do at some point, even if it's just a magazine article, which I would say I do for Fangoria, but that doesn't seem to exist anymore, an oral history of splatterpunk, because those guys are all still alive and they're all really interesting people and they've really thought about their place in horror a lot.
Yeah, I've noticed with a lot of them, because I mean, I've read most of their books. I really think each one of them got better after splatterpunk. Like, for instance, Skip and Spectre, I believe their best work was done solo. Like, I mean, I don't think, Craig Spector will ever write a book as good as Turnaround Again, or that John Skip will ever write a book as good as, like, say, Jake's Wake. Because it just seems like they really came into their own as writers without kind of like, I don't want to say the baggage of 80s culture, but there was like, kind of, that mass. Everything was kind of uniform, and when they broke out of that.
You get really famous with your first book, right? Like, those guys, David Shaw will always be probably the most famous for Kill Riff. Joe Lansdale, as much as he's done, Night Runners was what he was best known for a very long time. Like, that first book that breaks you out is the book for you, Yeah.
Night Runners was actually the first novel that ever, like, genuinely kind of scared me. And I've never actually had that, like, reaction to a horror novel since then.
We tried really, really hard to do a Paperbacks from Hell with Valancourt for Night Runners. And at the end of the day, we just couldn't make, Joe's Lansdale's a big deal these days, and we couldn't make the numbers work for him. But we really wanted to, because we felt like it's a great book, but because it's a rape revenge book written by a dude, we wanted to do an introduction where we talked to him and really gave it the context of the time to say, this is where horror literature was, and this is where the moral majority was, and this is why this book is so different from these other books, and we just couldn't make it work. And that original art's beautiful for that cover.
The thing with Splatterpunk is it did seem to the punk part of it seemed as important as the splatter part, because at least from what I've seen, a lot of like earlier horror books usually focused on like families, on like people who were, you know, blue collar workers, things like that. Whereas like Splatterpunk was very focused on disaffected young people. Yeah,
exactly. Well, you know, and it's interesting you say that, because that was a time in horror where that was getting big, late 80s, early 90s. Kathy Koja's The Cipher was another one. It was about like a young couple of artists living in a Rust Belt city who just a hole appears in their storage unit that seems to like absorb everything. Or, oh God, I just lost my, Poppy Z Bright was also, you know, that whole thing of running away from home and finding your own real family somewhere else among the monsters. And Clive Barker was doing that a little bit. Like, but yeah, you're right. That came very late in the horror cycle, away from families, children, all that stuff, these individuals.
You know, I think my favorite section from your book was probably the Inhumanoids chapter 7.
Oh. Yeah.
I like those where it's not an archetype you're dealing with as the monster, but you know, something that you may not even be able to recognize or identify as anything. Like there was that one book that I've never seen since, but it's highlighted in that chapter, The Shinglo by Alex Kane.
Yeah.
With a soldier with a skeleton. There's got to be skeletons, obviously.
Of course.
But yeah, that's a really good cover too. But I've never read any Alex Kane, and it's sad that a lot of these, though you've highlighted them, they may never, you know, get the. They may still be brushed under the table into obscurity. You know.
Do you think a lot of them actually were passionate about like the crazy horror they were doing, or did they just do it specifically because, you know, they wanted to write for the market?
Did he freeze?
Yeah, I think he did.
Yep, no, I'm back. Hey.
Great. So what did you have? Yeah, I can hear you. Zach, ask me.
Good.
Do you think a lot of the writers, especially the ones that kind of faded away into obscurity, were passionate about the horror thing, or were they just writing for the market? Like, I guess specifically, I always wonder about Ruby Jean Jensen. I mean, I know she's like one of the main ones, but I always got the feeling that, you know, she was actually into it. But then you read a lot of the other books, especially if it's one written by someone who, you know, just put out one book. There's really not a lot of passion involved.
Well, you know, it's interesting, right? I mean, it's hard to know. I was talking to, oh God, I can't remember his name, who did Nightblood. I can't remember. T. Chris Martindale. And, you know, that was this like character he developed with his brothers, and like, yeah, there it is. Third one down. That was a character he developed with his brothers, and they had this whole mythology of this monster hunter, and they thought these would be really cool. And like, it was something they were really, really super into. And then like the book didn't take off, and, you know, the horror genre was coming to a close, and his second book came out, but after that, his contract just sort of like evaporated. And so I think he was passionate about writing that book. But after he was like, well, wait, what? I can't make a living doing these things I love. You know, he became a programmer and makes a good living doing it. And so, yeah, Ruby Jean Jensen's an interesting one, because I think she's got a really good like, I've read some William Johnstone that's truly stinky, and I've read some William Johnstone that's truly hilarious. And I think on a like line by line basis, Ruby Jean Jensen probably outwrites William Johnstone. I don't think William Johnstone cares. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I really have to disagree with that, because maybe it's like on a story level and not a writing level, But as you said, like John Stone's books move a lot quicker.
Oh yeah.
With Ruby Jean Jensen, I always thought her like on the sentence level, it was just like so plain that sometimes like if the story is not good, like reading her writing is very difficult. It's like when she's good, she's good, but when she's bad, it feels like something that's kind of like almost like a second grade level.
Well, I'll definitely say, like, no, I think on a plain, like, technical noun verb kind of level, Ruby Jean Jensen's probably a better writer than John Stone. John Stone will write some sentences I don't even understand what he's trying to say. But John Stone's a hell of a lot more entertaining writer, because I think Ruby Jean Jensen, okay, here's my idea. It's a killer baby. And that's the idea. William Johnstone's like, it's a killer baby, but I got bored in chapter 3, so I threw in some werewolf bikers, and I don't know, werewolves are kind of satanic, so let's have some Christian missionaries, but they're also maybe dolls in chapter 4. Like, William Johnstone just kept adding. And Ruby Jean, I agree. That's way more my speed. Ruby Jean Jensen, I think she liked what she was doing. I think she believed in it. I think she was committed. But I also think, she was basically a Zebra House author. So she was probably getting $4,500 to $8,000 per book, and then probably making another $20,000 to $30,000 on top of it with royalties. So she was doing well, but she was definitely their girl. She was their author. And so I don't know. It's hard to say. I would love to know more about her. She's someone I don't know enough about. Someone like Elizabeth Engstrom, who did Black Ambrosia, that's up there. I mean, Liz is a real believer. She really wanted to write literature that used horror as a way of looking at the world. And that was something, she was an alcoholic for a long time and got sober and started writing. And she wanted to use horror as a way to make sense of the world. A way to write about people she knew when she was drinking, a way to write about sort of her life at times when it didn't make sense to her, like when she was a teenager and a young adult. And so like Liz is a true believer and a true, she wasn't writing to the market. I mean, obviously she wanted to sell, but she was writing to express herself. And it's the same, you just had up there, Lisa Tuttle was one of the books you went by, and Barry Wood. Barry Wood was very much, who wrote The Tribe, was very much someone who was writing to the market. Yeah, Lisa Tuttle, Nest of Nightmares, that Valancourt brought back into print for the first time in the States, it's some of the most messed up short stories. I mean, if she'd written 3 of these, she would be another Clive Barker. There's a story in there about a writer who's a science... So Lisa Tuttle wrote a lot with George R.R. Martin, and they were good friends. They won their first, I think, Nebula Award for a story they co-wrote together. She was part of the Wild Card series, but she wrote some horror. And she's got a short story, A Nest of Nightmares, that is about a fantasy sci-fi writer who gets invited to go to a small convention, only about 800 people, back out of her hometown. And she goes back, and the entire convention is just them sort of gaslighting her, inch by inch by inch by inch. Like, why do you think you're better than us? Why do you think you get to lead? Why do you think you get to be some big author? We kiss your ass. And the last scene of it is her hosts who are taking care of her, and she really wants to get out of there and get to her flight, but she's dependent on them because they have the car. And they decide to stop at a restaurant, and she's like, but my flight's leaving. And they're like, Lisa, you're not leaving. You're not going anywhere. And she's just trapped again in her hometown. It's like the most nightmarish, like Twilight Zone creepy thing. It's phenomenal.
Might be a good metaphor for that kind of fame.
Well, and that kind of imposter syndrome, right? Like, wait a minute, I left wherever I grew up to go off and do this, but what? I'm like getting ideas above my station? Like when does the other shoe drop and everyone calls me out for being just trash from Nebraska or South Carolina or wherever it is I'm from, So it's hard to know the motivation of it. Definitely there were people writing to the market. William Johnstone, bless him, I think he was writing to sell because his heart was in Westerns, but he was writing horror because horror was popular at the time. But bless his heart, he was insane, so he wrote amazing horror.
like another one that's there in the also enjoyed and that was recently re-released. Let's Go Play at the Adamses. Mendel Johnson definitely was not writing to please anybody.
No. Oh, did you read the whole thing?
I did. Yeah, I think Ben did too.
Yeah, that's a tough book.
I love it. I think it's amazing. I never want to read it again.
You know, there's this moment where the realization that she's going to die crystallizes in her mind, and it really bummed me out. I was not having fun anymore. You know, by the time it really leaves a stain on you after you read. And it's a pretty consistent reaction that people have to reading this, but everyone reads it out of curiosity because it's hyped up, whether it be the description, the reactions people have to it, or the cover. But for some reason, everyone has to. This is like an endurance test of reading, right here.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Wait, Jeremy, would you say that one's harder to read than, say, Hillary?
Wait, what's Hillary? I don't know Hillary.
Well, Hillary by Angel Jalique. It's so gory and gruesome and graphic and hateful that it stopped being even amusing in the way that this book is. It's like, you know, skinning people's faces off and then smearing feces on the open tissue, stuff like that. It's not even. I know Angel Jalique is a lawyer, apparently, according to her bio. But she takes it into a realm of gruesomeness that's not fun, but it really it wants to hurt you as a reader almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's actually like one. I wouldn't be comfortable like being like in a freaking room with her. Like she got to have something wrong in her head. I talked to her and she's cool, but you don't write something like that and not be kind of screwed up.
But yeah, this is an endurance test in the way that Cannibal Holocaust or Faces of Death would be now, well,
Let's Go Play at the Adams too. I mean, I never want to read it again, but I find that final chapter really beautiful, where she sort of accepts her death and like kind of transcend. I mean, it's beautiful writing. It's just in the service of something that really, like you said, it leaves a mark on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things that almost transcends just being paperback horror into something beyond it. That sounds a little bit pretentious, but it definitely was something. Well, like you mentioned, where the person very deeply believed in what they were and what they were writing. They weren't just writing to please the market. Ken Greenhall is another one in that vein.
Absolutely. It's funny. I've talked to Mendel Johnson's daughters, and they were telling me he grew up in a really abusive household, and so like he grew up wanting to trust people and wanting to like people, but being taught this tough lesson again and again that no one's going to protect you. And I feel like Let's Go Play at the Adams definitely is a book written by someone who learned some hard lessons as a kid that maybe a kid shouldn't have to learn. And so it's, like you said, it's not writing to the market. This was, Johnson wanted to say something. And it's amazing. This book was written in 1977 or something, and we're still talking about it. There's so many books that were written in 1977 that have been forgotten. It's kind of incredible. But Ken Greenhall is great. Yeah.
I've actually heard that there were 2 sequels to Let's Go Play at the Adamses, both unofficial. One where they're brought up on charges, but they get off due to a good defense lawyer or something. And the other where they just kind of go on, and it's implied that maybe their parents didn't go on vacation but were murdered or something.
That's interesting.
I've not read either one, and that may be false memory filling in some gaps there, but both of them are unofficial by people who took it upon themselves to try to extend the story in that book.
Yeah, no, in real life, like what the case is based on, it infuriates me to this day. Like I've only read
the
Jack
Sylvia
Fisher
Lukens.
one.
Yeah,
how the woman, like I guess the mother, actually got out of jail like after like 5 years or something.
Oh man, are you kidding?
Yeah, it's freaking
Sylvia
horrible.
Light. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's awful. Ken Greenhall, who wrote his first book, Elizabeth, under his mom's maiden name, Jessica Hamilton, he's interesting. I mean, he had a day job all his life, And his books never did that well. Every one sold less than the one before. Each was from a crappier publisher with a crummier cover. But they're really amazing books. I mean, he is a writer. I mean, he's kind of like the way Shirley Jackson has that very precise, very chilly, very kind of darkly funny, but kind of mean voice. Ken Greenhall's got it. And, it's a case of like there were so many paperbacks out, so many horror novels, and he had a day job. So he just never made it. But he wrote a book, his last book, he wrote it in retirement. It's not horror, it's historical fiction. It takes place in the 16th century, I think, called Lenore. Yeah, Lenore, right there. And if you like historical, oh man, that's a tiny JPEG. If you like, I mean, I'm sort of a nut for history. So Lenore, it's the painting that's on the cover is by Rubens, and it's 4 studies of the head of a Negro. And it was a painting he did in 16 something or 16 something. There was a study of this freed slave who had freed himself, bought himself out of slavery, and was in, I think, Amsterdam. And he did this study of his head. And the story's told from his point of view. And this guy is like, living in Scandinavia in the 1600s. He's black, he's African. And he's like, no one looks like me. And I feel so sorry for them. And the whole thing is about like how he's the most beautiful man in the world. And everyone is just a sad, sad, pale shadow of him. And it's a really funny, really good book. But, it came out from a tiny press and no one cared. But that's everyone, right? If you write for a living, your destiny is the remainder table. You will be forgotten. Baxter, or AKA Hellhound, the book where like each chapter is from a different point of view, but a lot of them from the point of view of a sociopathic bull terrier, who's the best character in the book. He's great. Has anyone seen the movie Baxter that was based on this? I think it's French.
Yeah, I have.
How is it? I've never seen it.
I think it's really good. It's pretty faithful to the book, and I think it definitely captures what the atmosphere of the book is. It doesn't really try to be like a straight up horror. It really does just feel like a dark existential drama, which is what Hellhound is at its core.
Yeah. Did you like the book?
I really love the book.
Yeah. Well, I love that like this dog just is like, he winds up being the hero of this book just because everyone else is so like weak and crummy.
Is it better than the other one? The only one I've read is Elizabeth.
I kind of don't know. They're definitely in a similar vein of this of taking someone who, like in most people's eyes, is like vulnerable and maybe kind of dumb, like a teenage girl or a dog, and putting them on this and making them into like a dangerous sociopaths. And I don't think it's as disturbing because but I think it has a better, I guess, plot maybe.
Yeah, I like both books a lot, but like, I think Hellhound's probably the better book just because he was a better writer by then. It was his second one.
One of the most descriptive novels that you turned me on to when I read Paperbacks from Hell was this one here about a were piranha in the like
nightlife. Yeah.
Wow. Were piranha. That's just such an image in my mind that I had to get a physical copy. I usually go electronic, but I had to go physical with this because that's just such an awesome, an entheogenic drug used in shamanic rituals from a Venezuelan mountain people. And a were piranha. That's just awesome,
Did you read it or
not yet? But that it made me buy it.
It is the most Miami Vice of all books. It's Miami Vice, but set in Tampa with shape-changing were piranhas and were jaguars. To me, that book is a blast. It's trashy and crazy and over the top and moves and is ridiculous. Like it kind of like just is like, I don't know, man. It's like the season finale. I wish Miami Vice could have gone out on.
Speaking of
that would have been
Florida,
great.
Speaking of cops in Florida, that reminds me of the dang Riptide by Donald Cheatham. Did you read that one for your research?
No, what's this? Sorry, now I got to listen to this. Wait, what?
It's the one. It was the zebra shark book, and like, it's Riptide by Donald. I think it's. Let me see. I can't read how you spelled that. It was Zebra's book that was kind of like their answer to Jaws, and it was like freaking horrible.
Ooh.
But let's see if it comes up there. Huh. I don't know why it's not coming up.
Is Riptide one word or two?
I think it's one. It might be two.
There's categories for both, but don't see a Donald.
Just do Cheatham, like Cheat. I think it's Ham.
Ah.
Not seeing it. This must be a really obscure one or something.
No, go to my books. I mean,
okay, here we go.
There it is. Wait, let's see this cover.
Yeah.
Whoa. Yes, I've seen that cover, but I didn't read it. Is it good or is it fun?
No, it's not. Now, at the end, it is, and I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it. Like, I have a thing about hating spoilers, but this book is so bad that you shouldn't read it. It's very dull and really like soft, almost pornographic through a lot of it, because there's this the main character is a cop, and I think he's from freaking Oklahoma, and there's all these like freaking Vietnam type flashbacks to Oklahoma where he had like all these freaking like run-ins with a serial killer, and it felt like a different novel. And anyway, like he kills that person, but it traumatizes him, and so he moves to Florida, and there's this Jaws type thing going on, and it's really bizarre because there's so many weird things in it. Like, I'm remembering this really weird obsession with Holiday Inn, because if you read like the like kind of like the acknowledgement thing at the very beginning of the book says, thanks to the Holiday Inn of so and so who put up with me. So I guess he wrote the book.
Whoa.
Holiday Inn or something. But freaking throughout the whole book, Holiday Inn
product placement.
Yeah, it pops up so many times in freaking weird places. And okay, so the book's really boring, and the shark doesn't come in that much. But then, like maybe the last quarter of the book, everything becomes about this gigantic, massive hurricane that's like destroying the whole Florida town. I think it's Tampa, actually. And the last freaking thing standing is a Holiday Inn, and like light is shining on it, and it's just like, it's freaking insane. It's one of the weirdest books I've ever read. But it
go ahead.
I was just going to say it's really strange because it goes from being a horrible Jaws ripoff to being like a natural disaster hurricane thing with Holiday Inn. Like, it's just
Well, it's weird when you get the feeling someone wanted to write book A, but they had to write book B to do it. Like, he had to write the shark book to write his natural disaster book. And I got to say, that painting of the shark on the cover, like, he looks like his name is like Norman Gottlieb. Like, hi, I'm Norman. I'm here to do your taxes. Don't mind me. I just need last year's receipts. Like, he looks so like dadcore there.
Yeah.
By the way, Frank,
he does. He looks like a painting of like a stereotypical dorky guy with fangs.
Yeah, exactly. Dork with fangs.
By the way, Frank Edler from Bazong says hi.
Oh, Frank, hello. Well, there's another great. So we tried with the Valancourt line of Paperbacks from Hell books. We really, really wanted this book called Alligator, which is a Jaws knockoff. I don't think it's from Zebra, but it's set in the Everglades. I think the author's name is
super expensive.
Will, it has become, it's Julia Katz, Katz, I think, or I think it's Katz, or Krantz, maybe, Kr. Just try Alligator, see what comes up.
Memoirs mostly.
No, really?
Yeah.
Oh God, I wish I could. Hold on, I'm gonna take a look on my phone.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Shelley Katz. Yes.
This is the effect your book has on us. We start searching for endless titles to ooh and awe at, you know.
So it's that cover. I've seen a better cover, but so late 70s horror. It is amazing. This is the book that people think Jaws is, because the movie Jaws is one of my favorite movies. The book of Jaws is pretty not great, and this is the movie version of Jaws, but set in the Florida Everglades. So instead of like, Yankees, it's all like sort of like Everglades white trash. It is so. David Foster Wallace has said this is one of his 10 favorite books of all time.
Wow.
It is phenomenal. And like you were saying, there's a whole hurricane ending of it where they have to tie themselves to trees and they go through the hurricane. It's bonkers. And we finally, James, who's the head of Runs Valancourt, tracked down Shelley and was like, we really want to republish this book. We want to license this cover art that was for it, not this one, but another version, and like all this. And she's like, nah, not worth my time.
What?
And we were all like, no, because it's so good. So please, if you can find this for a reasonable price, which I would say is $20 or less, this book delivers.
Why do you think she didn't want it to come back in print? Did she give like a reason?
She was just like, well, I'll have to do all this tax stuff for that, and I just don't want to deal with it.
Was that the only book she wrote?
I think it is. I think she and her husband originally wrote it, and then her name's the one that's on that edition. Sometimes they're billed together. I just think, I don't know. We wanted to do Harry Knight's Carnosaur, which is so much fun. I mean, it is Jurassic Park, years before Jurassic Park existed. Harry Adam Knight, yeah.
This is the guy that wrote The Fungus or something?
Yes, Slimer, right?
Yeah, and it's so much fun. It's never had a good cover. We were going to license something separate. And it's Jurassic Park, years before Jurassic Park, but instead of being on an island, it's in the British suburbs. So it's like dinosaurs rampaging through like gardens and like bus stations and stuff.
And an nymphomaniac wife.
And a nymphomaniac wife. It is so much fun. And basically, I think it was Penguin Random House, but it might have been someone else, was like, nope, we have the copyright on this. And we're like, no, it came out of, now those guys are on it, but I'm not sure that's legal, the Carroll Publishing Corporation thing.
Really?
Yeah, we talked to the publisher and they were like, it was one of the big five, and they were like, we have the copyright, and we challenged it. And, or James challenged it, and it came out that no, they no longer had the copyright, but Knight's literary estate had to file the paperwork to say, I want to reclaim my copyright now that yours is expired. And his last remaining living relatives are, I think, some cousins who live in Australia who are in their 80s. And we sent them the paperwork and they filled it out and sent it back. And the publisher was like, no, we need another piece of paperwork. And they were like, and it has to be faxed to us. And they were just like, guys, like, I've got better things to do with my life. And we're like, yeah, I get it. You're 83 years old. You're in Australia. You're going to have to find a fax machine and fill out more stuff. I get it. But because of this bullshit, Carnosaur is out of print, and it shouldn't be, because it's a fun book. And they may have found a way to e-publish it, but they have not found a way to bring Carnosaur back for print, I don't think.
Is it any relation to the movie?
Yeah, it's what Roger Corman licensed, simply so he could use the title, because it has nothing to do with the book. But Carnosaur is a great title.
Wow.
I wasn't too big a fan of Slimer, but I'm going to check out Carnosaur.
Carnosaur's not good. I mean, let me be honest, but it's fun.
I'm liking this one. I'm reading it on and off, kind of. But
how is it? Is it good? I haven't read it.
I am liking it so far. Yeah. I don't remember much about it right now because I read an insane amount of books every week. But yeah, I love that voracious, reading frenzy that your book Paperbacks from Hell inspires in me in particular, where it's like, oh my God, I've got to look at them all. I've got to gaze upon every one of them. I've got to know everything that was ever written in the 80s. And it feeds that mania in my mind,
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because like originally I'm like, a movie guy. Like, I mean, I've read all my life. I've been a big reader all my life, but like my real first love that like really yanked my crank was movies, specifically Hong Kong movies. And there was a way that critics were writing about them it made you want to see those movies. And I wanted to do that with books. I wanted to be like, I want people to read this and want to just go rock out on like 400 paperbacks.
Yeah. You also wrote My Best Friend's Exorcism. And Ben, didn't you read Horror Store about a haunted IKEA?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, that was my first novel. Yeah.
Yeah, Horror Store is a really good book.
Thanks.
Basically, it's like Jeremy said. It's basically like and the design on it is great too.
They did an amazing job with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have that in mind when you were writing it, or was it just you were just writing this story about the haunted IKEA? You were lucky to get a publisher that did that.
Yeah. So that was something that like I actually lucked into that job. I had sent a different book to that publisher, Quirk, and Jason Rakulik, who is the editor there, hated the book I sent, but he really liked my writing style. And he was like, and I had sent a book that was sort of a revisionist haunted house book. And he said, I've been wanting to do some kind of new haunted. I feel like haunted house books are so old and creaky. And we were talking about like what would be haunted now, which was weird because he had just rejected my book. But I was like, okay, I got an editor on the phone. I'll keep tap dancing. And we were talking about big box stores. And I was like, what, like, isn't that where people spend all this time? And like where hauntings happen is where people are and people are shopping. And then he was like, well, an IKEA would be amazing because it's like bedrooms. And I was like, fuck yeah, an IKEA. And so he came up with the idea of having that trim size of an IKEA catalog and having the cover be like an IKEA. And one of the nice things with working at a smaller publisher is then I was like, well, because bigger publishers never let you talk about the design. But I was like, that'd be cool. But what if the interior, we did like a piece of furniture for every chapter? And then Andy Reid, who's the designer, was like, oh, and we would need catalog copy for that. And I was like, yeah. And then it could like totally get darker and they could become torture devices. And then we all just kept like adding on to that. And it was such a fun way to work. Like by the end of it, we were doing like order forms and like, okay, where's the fine? I wrote every word of text in that book I wrote because I've written that for real. I mean, I was a freelance writer for years. I've written catalog copy. I've written like the small print you see at the bottom of your catalog that says, to get more copies, to order a fund, call 1-800-599-NUTS. And, orders take 6 to 8 weeks to arrive. So it's so much fun to do that for like a horror novel, to like bend that kind of corporate copywriting to that. And that cover, which was genius, they were going to do this big photo shoot and buy all this IKEA furniture. And then it was costing too much money. And so Jason was like, can we do something different? And he found an artist who makes miniatures. They make miniature dioramas. So that entire diorama of that cover is 11 inches wide by, I think it's like 8 inches high.
If you look at it close, you can see that it's tiny. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. It's an artist in Philadelphia who does miniatures like that. And I am such an idiot. I didn't buy it. I should have bought the model from her. I didn't. She destroyed it later, like repurposed it and used it in other things later. She used the couch but like she built tiny IKEA furniture. It's so amazing.
Yeah, and this is kind of a spoiler with it, but I really like the way that you took it because, like I say, I'd say it's a minor spoiler, but when the hauntings really start, they discovered that the IKEA used to be a panopticon prison, and the warden who ran it was this sort of psychopath who believed that forcing prisoners to work hard would like spiritually heal them. So there is like a heavy theme of behind all this happy, bright colored bullshit is the panopticon of neoliberal capitalism.
Yeah, well, exactly, and also that was a real philosophy in prisons in the 19th century before prisons got reformed. And now there was this idea that like, oh, work will redeem your soul, but they're going to decouple labor from production. So it's like you would have a crank you would turn, but all it did was turn a box of sand or turn a box of gears. It didn't do anything. So you'd have to turn the crank like 3,000 times in a day, but it didn't do anything. Or you walked on a treadmill, but instead of the treadmill turning millstones that milled wheat, it turned nothing. And so it's this idea that like just the labor, just the physical exertion would sweat out the sin. And like then you look at the way prisoners were used in the 30s and 40s on like chain gangs, and you look even now where they're used as like call center people and like data entry and all this, and like, you know, it's this weird idea of like, I mean, I've worked retail and I hated it and got out of it as fast as I could, and I have nothing but admiration for people who can do that. But it's this idea that like you spend hours in this intensive job, and it's like sucking your life from you. You know, it's like, you know, you do all this work and it's like at the end of the day, you get a paycheck for like, you know, $11.25 an hour. It's like, Jesus, I made $80 today and I've had my soul sucked out of my body.
And also the whole prison experience is pretty humiliating as it is, between the strip searches and the shackles and all this stuff. And then to work basically slave labor. I mean, yeah, it is dehumanizing. I don't think it warrants burning down cities, but I acknowledge that it is terribly dehumanizing and humiliating.
Yeah, well, you know, and it's funny. Like I for a long time I was a temp worker in LA when I lived there, and like you get these jobs that are just like, you know, this was in the 90s, so like I'm sure now these jobs would be done digitally, but it was just like. I worked at one point. I had this temp job for, I think it was a little over 3 months, where a company that rented out billboards had bought another company that rented out billboards. And the company that rented out billboards that hired me, they had a 7-digit filing system. But the company they bought had a 4-digit filing system. So someone had to go through and put a sticker with 7 digits on each of these files and just make sure they matched up at the end. And it was a warehouse full of files. And so literally what I did for a little over 3 months was look at the file, look at the name on the file, because they always had the name of the plot it was on. Like it would be like lot 190-12. The current sticker, yep, it's 4190. We're putting on 4190-001. Move on to the next one. And that's what I did for 3 months. I mean, it's like, it would drive you nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of know what you mean. My current job, like half of it is call center stuff, and half of it is I basically need to look up lost life insurance policies, which basically entails taking social security numbers from different people, plugging it into 3 different systems, and then confirming whether or not we ever had the policy. And
right.
If I couldn't like listen to music and podcasts while I was doing that, I would go insane.
So how long is your list? Like how many policies do you have to look up on a shift, say?
It's not really based on that. It's more of like you do calls for this many hours, and then you do the list for this many hours.
Oh, so the list is sort of infinite. It's however many hours you devote to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's technically not infinite, but you know, what they have is like really long.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I also got to say, call center work, it's like no one's calling you because they're in a good mood. Like even I'm an asshole when I call a call center. Like that's just like, that sounds grueling to me to have to be on the recipient of that.
I've worked in call centers most of my adult life, and yeah, they aren't fun, but it's
like,
nice
how
to
do
be
you,
able to write
how do you
between.
separate yourself from that?
I basically
drinking.
I would say, yeah, I just drink a lot when I'm off the clock. But I mean,
cover. You've even got the Be Kind Rewind sticker up there.
Now, I really did love that book. That's one of my favorite books, I think, of 2019. I can't believe
thanks.
Included it in the list.
That cover is crazy. So the art director at Quirk at that time was this guy. So Andy Reid is the art director who did Horror Store, and she did my new book, Southern Book Club. This guy, Doogie Horner, was there and he's the one who did My Best Friend's Exorcism in paperback. And they just wanted to do the same cover for hardcover for paperback. And Doogie was like, no, this book is the 80s. We need to do an 80s VHS, like wizard video cover. And there wasn't time. There was only a 6-week turnaround, which is not enough time to do original art. And Doogie found this guy, Hugh, I want to say Woolley, but that's wrong. That's an author who did a book. Oh, God, I can't remember his name. But he found this Australian author who did some Star Wars art and was like, will you do this? And the guy's like, sure, I'll read the book and I will give you one sketch. And you can give me notes on that sketch and then I'm giving you finished art. Because there wasn't time to do a whole review process and 2 rounds of notes and all this. And he nailed it in one. And all this entire thing is Doogie and Hugh, just knocking this out of the park against all odds. And this cover has sold me a shit ton of books, man. So many people see this cover and grab the book because it's such a great cover.
The colors are there.
Yeah.
It's layered because you've got this action here. You've got her presiding over everything. You got the children down here playing. And you've got the stickers up here to remind us that, hey, it's just a book, but it kind of resembles a VHS.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's an amazing book cover.
But let's see. What Southern Book Club for Vampire Slayers is your most recent, correct?
Yeah. And I get the title wrong all the time. It's the book with the ridiculously long cover title. Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, or the Southern Vampires Guide to Slaying Book Clubs, or the Slaying Vampires Guide to Southern Clubs. Clubbing Southerners. I don't know. But yeah.
Clubbing Southern Vampires.
The Vampire's Guide to Clubbing Southern Books. But yeah, it's my vampire book. And I got to say, Andy did this cover, and it's very, very hard to draw peaches that don't look like a butt. So I'm really appreciative that she managed to do peaches that look like peaches and not buttocks. It
would have given it more sex appeal if you just made them look like butts.
Exactly. We went through a lot of revisions on this cover because they kept looking like butts, and then they look like boobs, and then they look like butts again. We went around.
Well, they still kind of look like boobs. I don't know, but
they're in the ballpark. They're pink. They're round.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. This
you want to buy them?
Yeah. And this is sort of set in the same neighborhood as Best Friend's Exorcism because it's the neighborhood I grew up in. But it's the Best Friend's Exorcism set in '88, and this is set in '93. I just, I'm like a dog. I keep coming back to my own vomit. But yeah, I keep returning to that. And it's about a vampire who moves into this neighborhood, and he's sort of like a serial killer because really vampires are just immortal serial killers. And the only people who can tell there's anything wrong are the housewives in the neighborhood who all belong to the same book club. And of course, no one believes them because, operative word, they're housewives. And who believes why? Housewives. So, yeah. It's the new one, and I guess part of the reason I did it this way is I'm obsessed with the Bridges of Madison County, the book, and because the hero of it, Robert Kincaid, is this dude. He's sort of this blue collar artist who wears jeans and a denim jacket, but he's a photographer and he's got the soul of a poet, and he's got his banged up pickup truck, and he drives into town and he takes pictures, and then a housewife falls in love with him. They have an affair for a few days, but they got to keep it super secret. And then he disappears from town. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Is this book about Ted Bundy? That's the serial killer narrative. It's a guy from nowhere and he's going nowhere and no one knows who he is or where he comes from. And he comes to town and sort of some lady, risks her life with him, and then he disappears. It's that American icon, right? It's that cowboy. It's that Jack Kerouac. It's Henry Lee Lucas. It's and I feel like that's a vampire. It's a predator.
Yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia founded in your work, and understandably so. It's fun. Do you think we will ever exhaust the nostalgia trip that we're on right now? and get tired of it?
I don't know. It's funny. Like, I wrote Best Friend's Exorcism and set it in '88 because I knew it needed to be set in high school, because that's when sort of friendships are the tightest and the most sort of dramatic. And I needed someone to believe in something, to have faith in something that wasn't religion, because usually in exorcism stories about religion, I was like, yeah, I don't think that'll fly. And I realized that thing would be friendship. Like, you have that faith in your friends. But then I had to set it in high school because that's when friendships are the most dramatic. And my high school experience was '88. And I can't write about high school now. It's so alien to me. Like, the testing, everyone's got cell phones, like everyone's vaping. Like, I don't know that. And so I had to set it in the '80s because that's what I know, because I'm old as dust. And so Southern Book Club, I really want to set in the '90s because I feel like the '90s don't really have a set identity right now the way the '80s do, or the '70s or the '60s. And I think the '90s are super weird.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting what you say. Like, will we ever get tired of looking at our recent past? I'd like to think
so, because like right now, like my generation, we have zero identity. It's like you look at '80s and it's '80s. You look at '90s, and like everything is like alt and grunge and everything. And it's
Right.
like mine, like, the early 2000s to, the early 2010s. It's like, what the heck what are we?
No, it's true. But also, like, don't you think someone's gonna be like, "Hey, remember Bo Burnham?" Or like, "Remember Auto-Tune?" Like, like. I feel like in 15 years, every karaoke bar will have an Auto-Tune filter to put on the mic.
Yeah, they already have. A lot of them already have.
Oh, they do, really?
Echo, not Auto-Tune, but Echo on it to help make even the most drunk idiot sound like they can sing a little bit.
Exactly. But so, yeah, I know what you mean, but I feel like the '90s, when I came out of it, that was when I was in university and stuff, had no identity. Like, it was famously the decade where nothing happened. But I feel like now it's starting to come into focus as sort of like the roots of a lot of things that are going on now. Like, that was when the banks were deregulated. That was the first Iraq war. That was the first attack on the World Trade Center. That was all this stuff. Like, and so I feel like that's going to happen for what you're talking about, the 2000 to 2010. Like, that's what my nephew...
I guess I was going culturally.
Yeah, well, and that's interesting, right? Because, like, someone was talking
TikTok.
to me that yeah. Well, someone was talking to me about, like, they want to go back and write a piece about 9/11 movies that came out in like 2002 and 3. Like, Adam Sandler and Chris Rock made a 9/11 movie. I forgot that. Like, it was like 2004.
I wasn't aware.
Oh my God, it's like their super serious, sad dad movie about 9/11, and it's so awful. Like, you look at it now and it is so boring and terrible, but at the time, I'm sure they're like, hey man, we're brave artists. Like, United 93, the Paul Greengrass movie that's like about the plane that crashed on 9/11 in Pennsylvania. Like, there was so much crazy shit that came out of that era that I think we've kind of had a little cultural amnesia about, because some of it's pretty embarrassing.
Yeah, remember when they canceled the Dixie Chicks for opposing the Iraq War?
Yes. And remember there was that karaoke movie in 2006 that, like, Gwyneth Paltrow and all these famous people did, where they're like, we're poor white people living in the heartland. We're just like you. We love karaoke. It's like, what? It's like Gwyneth Paltrow. It's like, oh, I wish I could remember the rest of it.
Miss Goop.
Yeah, exactly. Steaming her vagina.
Here, have a candle that smells like my pussy.
Oh my God. I know. Well, that's sort of the amazing thing now is, like, I can't wait till the horror movies start coming out about lifestyle branding. And like Instagram.
What is I'm not familiar with that terminology. What does that mean? Like,
well, it's like you act online as if you're a normal person, but what you're doing is trying to make yourself look like you're being paid by corporate sponsors to have this sort of aspirational lifestyle. Like, here I am just hanging out in the backyard with my kids, but it's a really
like
beautiful...
Elizabeth Warren with the beer.
Yeah.
or that. Yes, exactly.
Family vloggers are ripe for horror stories because that idea is fucking horrifying.
Yeah. Well, it also, doesn't TikTok have an it's AI that promotes stuff is it's not known, the algorithm. It's like completely software to code driven.
Pretty much, yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
even know
because
what TikTok is. Like,
well,
I'm
there's
out of touch.
like people out there who figured out what they think the AI code responds to. And so they're making videos that make no sense. Like there's one where a mother and son walk backwards into a Walmart and recite the months of the year and then fall on the floor and laugh and run in a circle because they've noticed that those are the visual cues that the TikTok algorithm upvotes. And so they want to upvote so they can get, their advertising pays more and their sponsors are happy. But it's like, in the meantime, real life people went into a real life Walmart and acted in a real fucked up way to please an algorithm. That's dystopian.
Yeah, that's even worse than like on YouTube videos where they would have all these like weird, like, oh, Spider-Man and pregnant Elsa, because for some fucking reason that combination just pleased the YouTube algorithm and kids were like eating that shit up.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird, right? Human beings are doing things in the real world that make no sense to make software happy.
Wow.
This is like we didn't have to, the Terminators didn't have to take us over violently. They just had to, get a hold of the money. Yeah.
Oh my
Here,
God.
have some money and serotonin, bitch.
I gotta say, for a conversation that started upbeat about Nazi leprechauns, we wound up in a dark place.
Got darker than Nazi leprechauns. Wow.
We went there, and I actually have to run in a second. I have to have dinner with my family.
No problem.
Okay.
At least you have a family.
No, they're just algorithms.
It's been,
but I want them to like me.
It's been
everything. Okay. Everything is algorithms now. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted.
I'm assuming you guys are all just sophisticated software with like voice synthesizers.
We're not. Really.
That is true.
No, I'm the only person who isn't. Everyone else is just robots.
No, I'm the only person.
You're the one with the dang the glitch art profile.
Yeah, the pixel art right there.
Well, Grady,
you're just jealous of it.
Grady, before you go, do you have anything coming up you want to promote?
No, I mean, I'm doing a podcast these days called Super Scary Haunted Homeschool, cool. Which is like a history of vampires. So I'm just putting the 5th episode up now. But my website's GradyHendrix.com. It's Hendrix with an X. Like my mom just wanted me to have to spell that to people all the time. But the podcast, you can find it there. And the new episode is going to be up by Friday of this. Oh yeah, just scroll down a little bit. There it is. But yeah, it's all just dumb vampire stuff. So episode 5 comes up this week, and it's really dumb. It's all about sperm sucking and plagues and Serbian peasants with no noses and just ridiculous garbage.
Wait,
that sounds awesome.
Can I ask you one more question? And
yeah, of course.
How do you feel about extreme horror in the vein that's like it's almost not fun? It's like you want to see if it can scar you or how bad it hurts. Like, for instance, Serbian film or Melancholy, Angel's Melancholy, Cannibal Holocaust, and then the books by authors like Tim Miller and Matt Shaw, I think. You know what I'm talking about, where they're always...
yeah. That annoys me.
They're always...
It's not my thing. Like, I don't read or watch a lot of it because I just know it's not where I'm at. Mm-hmm. But like, I do remember being of an age where like, that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see stuff that left a mark. And like, I think everyone goes to that phase where you want to sort of test your own taste and see how far it goes. And so I'm always glad people are like that out there. People like that are out there doing that, because I think, like Sturgeon's Law, 90% of it's crap, but 10% of it's gold. Like Martyrs, I actually really like that movie. I won't ever see it again, but I'm really glad it exists, and I really enjoyed the first time I saw it. It was really made a big impression. Let's Go Play at the Adams. I'm glad it exists. I think it's an amazing book. It's not where I am now in my life, but I was for a while. So I'm glad that stuff's there. Like, just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's not okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm too old and complacent now, but when I was 24, 25, that's exactly the kind of stuff I wanted. So I'm glad it's out there for kids who want that experience.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been an honor. And
thanks for having me, man.
I would be glad to have you back and talk about some of your other work when you've released some more books.
You know? Yeah, especially the Hong Kong thing. I think that'll be pretty cool.
Oh yeah, well that book's going to be out in December, so let's do it.
Sweet,
awesome.
All right, it was great talking to you, Grady.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. Take care of you guys.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Wow, he brought a lot of energy to the show. Thanks again to Grady Hendrix. Loved Paperbacks from Hell, and I really need to get on the ball and read My Best Friend's Exorcism and Horror.
Yeah, My Best Friend's Exorcism is very, very good.
Yeah, Horror Story is great as well.
Cool.
I'm actually awake now.
Well, Thomas was cool too. I mean, it's a different mindset. Everybody brings a different energy, and I can appreciate all of them on their own merits. So I'll probably read some Thomas More eventually too.
Yeah, that new book that Ben was talking about a lot. That really does sound interesting. What was it? Alone.
Yeah, that really is a great book. It's like I just said, a lot of emotion in it. It has like great moments of just like sort of realizing your relation to the outside world, things like the frustrating limitations of language.
I think I'd rather read him, like just him, because that one I read, The Small Talk at the Clinic, that one just didn't do it for me, and I think it's because it was just so little of him and just the photographs or whatever. But I'd like to read him like just actually focusing on words.
Yeah, it's probably just because you don't like poetry, and that's what that book is.
Yeah, well, some poetry I like.